Well, my name is Rick Miller. I'm the first president of this school, Olin College. So just very briefly, we don't have enough time to tell you much about it. I can tell you that if you want to know more about it, you should probably pick up this book by Tony Wagner at Harvard. It's called Creating Innovators, The Making of Young People Who Will Change the World. And he's did a survey of a lot of institutions around that are working on that problem, and that's what Olin is doing, and there's a description in there, quite lengthy, of what Olin is about. My wife thinks of this as my midlife crisis. She constantly reminds me that I'm not smart enough to know how much trouble I'm really in, and she's rarely wrong. So before I got involved in this project, I spent 2 decades in the Pac-10 and the Big Ten at research universities, was Dean of Engineering at the University of Iowa, and was frustrated at trying to create change. And the Olin folks said they wanted to reinvent engineering education. There was a great deal of unhappiness about the way engineers are prepared. So they spent essentially $500 million to start over, an entirely new institution. And to make sure that we got it right, they didn't want this to turn out like all the others, they laid down some rules. One of them is we don't offer tenure to anyone. Another one is we don't have academic departments. And a third one is everything has expiration dates, including the curriculum. And at the beginning, students got full tuition scholarships for everything that it takes to go to the school. So that got your attention, okay? Now we had to reinvent what it means to be an engineer and what it means to be educated in the 21st century. And we spent a couple of years doing that, including a year of experimentation, which changed everything. We called it the Olin Partner Year. We had 30 kids that lived in construction trailers on the parking lot of the soccer field for a year, okay? They weren't students. They weren't taking classes. They didn't get course credit. They tried outrageous things that we knew would fail so we could watch them fail. That's something you can't do if you're offering degrees. You can't let people fail. That's not ethical. But they weren't students, okay? So we tried all kinds of outrageous stuff. And it's amazing what you can see by looking, as Yogi Berra used to say. So this first slide, I just want today to talk a little bit about why change of this scale might be important. First of all, why maybe we need T-shaped engineers. And if you look at this graph on the left, it's probably the scale is so small that you can't read it in the back, I'm sure. This is a graph of global population over all of human history. And what you find is that the globe has had fewer than 1 billion people throughout all time until about 1920. And look at what's happened. This sort of hockey stick picture should really make red lights go off in your head. What's driven this? Well, what's driven this is those of us in technology. We've made it possible to support so many more people on the planet. And I believe that there isn't one aspect of human life on the planet in our lifetimes and our kids' lifetimes that won't be affected by that graph. This also got the attention of the National Academy of Engineering, which has already been discussed a few times, with the 14 grand challenges that you see having to do with the areas of sustainability, security, health, and increasing lifestyle, because we've developed the expectation that every generation will expect to have a life at least as good as the last generation. You see a conflict here? We only have a certain size globe. We have this increasing population, decreasing resources, more conflict, and everybody thinks life's going to be better than it was the last generation. Something has to change. What marks these challenges as different from the challenges of the 20th century, where a couple of entrepreneurs went into a garage, maybe in Silicon Valley, invented a widget, threw it over the wall to free enterprise, and then it was launched into the world and created everything better, right? That's where iPhones came from. That's where lots of cool stuff came from. But what about the unintended consequences? Not everything that we did resulted in stuff that we wanted. Have you heard of global climate change? Maybe some of this stuff, you pull on it here and it produces a result over there. Understanding that system's complex, that complexity is a really important thing, which is not included in engineering education today. So we conclude from all this that we need a different kind of innovator, one who can span all of these disciplines and have conversations with people in very different places right from the start. By the way, it's easier to learn how to do that to talk to people who are disciplinary experts in a very different field when you're young than it is when you're mid-career. You might know it's easier to learn how to speak Spanish when you're 5 than when you're 45. They're wet cement when they're young. So maybe we need to begin to educate that way with the paradigm right from the beginning that assumes that being multidisciplinary in the way you think is fundamental to getting the right answer. But, okay, now I'm going to become the bad guy in the room. Our traditional way of education may actually be discouraging us from producing these kinds of innovators. And so we have some challenges to work on. For example, before we do that, I want to take a minute to talk about innovation. This is probably the most overused word in the English language. Everybody that I know thinks that innovation is the key to something, and everybody means something else by the word innovation. So just for the sake of today's conversation, I want to be a little more specific. Let me start out by saying creativity, which is sometimes confused with that, is the process of generating original ideas and insights. Now, that's actually not my definition. That's Sir Ken Robinson. He's done this many times. Inventiveness, though, is a little bit different. It's the process of generating original ideas and insights that have value. Okay, so this may be not just art. It has something, an intent behind it, which might produce value. But innovation is the process of generating original ideas and insights that have value and then implementing them in a way that changes many people's lives. Without the implementation, it's not an innovation, it's just a cool idea. Okay, a really profound innovation is an innovation that changes the world so profoundly that you can't remember what it was like before this thing happened. Okay, electricity, the automobile, the airplane, the internet, radio, television, space travel. They've changed lives in ways that people can't remember what they were like. I have an iPhone in my pocket. My daughters can't imagine how the caveman must have lived before the iPhone. It's just like unimaginable. All right, so if that's innovation, how does it happen? Now, I can tell you, this is what I was trained to think about innovation when I was a young faculty member. Okay? Innovation starts in the upper left. Research universities. If you don't have research universities, impossible to have innovation. Okay? And what happens is research universities create just-in-case science, lots of it. And then we take the just-in-case science and you throw it into the tech transfer office, and then what happens? Well, apparently they have pixie dust over there, and they sprinkle this on some of these ideas which turn into high-tech companies. And these high-tech companies, we argue as we go visit our congressman every February, turn into new jobs which generate new revenue, which will come back to you in the government so you can increase our budget at NSF. Okay, there you go, QED. That's all I need to do. We did that for many years. I know it's still a process. And I'm not saying that some innovation happens this way. Technology plays a role. All of those technical things that I just mentioned did create life-changing events in the world, and a lot of it came from universities, but not all of it. By the way, have you heard of the airplane? This was generated where? In a bicycle shop in Ohio, not in a physics lab in a university. So not all of it came from universities. Okay, but I have a completely different way of thinking about innovation that I think makes it clear why T-shaped individuals are fundamental. For example, to save time, I didn't put in the other slide. There's one in the beginning where kids go to school in K-12, and they all take roughly the same kinds of subjects, and they graduate and they go off to a university. When they go to a university, they major in something. When they major in something, they spend time in one of these circles, okay? This could actually be a map of almost all the major universities that I worked for. That circle in the upper left that says engineering and science, that's the engineering quad. This is just a bunch of buildings arranged in a closed unit. And the circle that's green there on the right, that's a business or economics program. Okay, all their schools are clustered in buildings that are closed as well. And then there's that other part of the campus, which engineers refer to as arts and sciences. People down there study things like psychology and art and humanities, literature, and so forth. Now, if you are looking for an accredited degree, say an ABET accredited degree in engineering, the requirements are that you spend 3/4 of your time studying courses in STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and math, which leads to a perception of the world through a certain lens. And that lens I'm calling feasibility, okay? Almost everything that you see for 4 years, and almost all the heroes that come down on stage with a PhD and talk to you are people with a PhD in science, math, technology, engineering. And by absence, all of the other ways of looking at the world seem apparently less important because they're not something that you spend much time thinking about. So you view the world through the lens of feasibility. Now, by the way, the folks over in the business school do the same thing. AACSB requires you to take accreditation requirements that half of all your credit hours have to be spent in accounting, business management, and so forth. So they have another lens in which everything they look at is not about feasibility, which I consider to be, is this possible relative to what we know about natural law? They study things through the lens of viability. Is this possible relative to what we know about financial laws? Things like the amount of capital that it generates, the ability to generate a sustainable return on investment, and so forth. Now, what about those people that go into the red circle and study, for example, psychology or art? Well, it turns out they develop a certain way of looking at the world too, which I'm calling desirability, because the kinds of questions that they ask are very different. Questions like, what is the meaning of truth? Or what is the meaning of beauty? Or what is the meaning of love? Do you think those are important questions? These things determine how people live their lives. This is why we are alive. All of human motivation comes from that circle down in the red. But none of the things that they're studying are measured with numbers or graphs or words. It's a completely different way of lens on looking at the world. Desirability. By the way, it's possible to get a degree in that red circle at the bottom without ever taking a course in natural science and maybe only taking one mathematics course in statistics. I know, I have a daughter who did it, okay? We talk about this at the dinner table quite a bit. All right. So does this matter? I think it's fundamental. Why? Because it's the intersection of these three circles in which all innovation happens. I don't believe you'll be able to come up with a single innovation which has profoundly changed the way people live that isn't simultaneously feasible and viable and desirable. All three. So somewhere in one head, all these ideas have to come together, in spite of the fact that we're continually pushing them apart the way we've organized our educational systems. So I thought, as a physical scientist, the real pathway to innovation comes through feasibility. But I happen to be on the board of trustees at Babson College, this business school next to us. And they use the word innovation all the time. And none of these people are scientists or engineers. So I'm thinking, well, I guess this is the way I, provide value to humanity, doing penance. And then it dawned on me one day, have you ever heard of the credit card? Do you think that's changed life on the planet? Do people behave differently now? My kids can't even conceive of what life would have been like without a credit card. Okay. How about iTunes? Do you think that might have had a role in Apple's success? And then think about this last circle, desirability. There may be a pathway to innovation that's very large that has nothing to do with viability or feasibility. What does Facebook sell? Okay, what does it sell? I think it sells an opportunity to tell your story, to tell your personal story to people who care. Why would people be passionate about that? Because every person on the planet has a fundamental need to be the most important person in somebody else's life. And the way they make that happen is through telling their personal story. The folks at Facebook figured that out. Now, whether they predicted this or they just did an experiment, I don't know. But unless you understand this human motivation dimension, you won't be an innovator in the 21st century. So you have to have T-shaped people. What do we need to do in order to make this happen? This is my last slide, okay? We need to do essentially 4 things. We need to redefine what it means to be an engineer. Students, kids think that engineers are all about technology, not about being creative, okay? Is there a problem? Well, let me give you a couple statistics. Last year, the percentage of bachelor's degrees in the US that were awarded to students studying engineering in any university, 4.5%. It's a declining market share. In Europe, it's about 12%. In Asia, it's about 30%. What are we going to do in 10 years when that drops to like 1%? So the number of kids who find what we define as engineering attractive is not great. About half of all students who begin studying engineering last fall won't graduate in engineering. Big hole in the pipeline. By the way, only 18% of the kids we graduate in engineering are women. So half of the world, apparently half of them don't have any interest in what we're doing, what we're calling engineering. So our definition of engineering, after puzzling over this for a decade, an engineer is a person who envisions what has never been and does whatever it takes to make it happen. By the way, science doesn't even show up in that definition. It's implicit though. Whatever it takes involves science. So how do we make this happen? We have to change 3 things. Who we teach. We're teaching the wrong people. There are creative people out there. Have you heard of folks like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, who started down this path and left? Why? Because of the way we teach. What we teach has to change, and how we teach it has to change. We're using methods which are known to be fundamentally ineffective. Otherwise, we're doing a great job. Thank you.